Okay. Hi, Greg. How are you? Welcome to the show.
Hi, Douglas. I'm doing well. Thank you very much for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. Nice to have you here. So, you're here obviously to promote your book, and your book sounds more like a journey rather than just an author's writing experience. The title is called Ordinary People, Extraordinary Lives, A Path to Reconciliation in Our Divided Time. I want to back up, though, before we start in on the book. What were you doing prior to writing the book?
I retired from Pfizer in October 21. And within a week, I had a website up and running and my project was kind of underway. So I spent 20 some odd years in big pharma, my last 20 some odd years before that. And I was in investment banking and trading before that.
So big pharma, and then at some point you decided to. I guess I got to ask why you would decide to embark on this trip. It looks like you went completely across the United States to do research for this book. Yeah.
And Canada too. I did both countries.
Okay. So give us the why. What
Why?
inspired
Good.
you for this?
Exactly. So that goes back to 2015. So in 2015, I was the MC at my 40th high school reunion in Halifax, Nova Scotia, where I grew up. And as the MC, I try to make sure I talked to as many people as I could that night. There were about 85 of us there, I guess. And I heard some great stories. I mean, I knew a few of them before I went because I knew some of the people that were going to be there. Um, but I thought, wow, these kids I went to high school with, they had some interesting stories to tell. And I thought, has anyone ever written about a book about ordinary people and their lives? And well, there actually have been a few. But you see, Douglas, I'm a numbers guy, not a letters guy, and so I said, nah, that's not going to happen. Well, a few years later, just before COVID, I was on a date. I'm divorced, and I was talking to this woman, and she asked me, uh, "Hey, Greg, have you ever considered writing a book?" I said, "Well, actually, I have one book in me," and I told her the idea. It was not about me, but it's about everyone else and their lives and so forth. And she said, "Go do it." And I thought, yeah, well, maybe. And then, of course, COVID hit, and that put everything on the sidelines. But I did read some books during COVID, and one was a book by Bruce Feiler, uh, Life is in the Transitions. And Bruce traveled to all 50 states over about a 2 year period, wondering how people get through difficult times. And it was from Bruce's book that I got the idea of travel. And then it was just a matter of when the time would be right to do it.
Well, it's interesting. How did you find the people to talk to? Did you just talk to anybody you happened to encounter? Or was this sort of, yep.
That's exactly the way it was. I stayed Airbnb everywhere I went. So I interviewed a handful of Airbnb folks. I gave I think like 19 speeches along the way, mostly at Rotary clubs, but and a few others. I met people in the street. Um, I met people who were referred to me by someone said, "Oh, you must talk to my cousin in," and so forth. However, I could meet people. And like I said, I met people literally in the streets and interviewed them.
How willing were people to share their lives with you?
Yeah, no, that's interesting. So here I am, a perfect stranger to most of these people. I did interview a handful of people, small number of people in Illinois where I lived before I left, to put those stories, mini stories that I wrote on my website to show that I actually have done some of this. But people, once they got going, they were more than willing to share. I used a protocol by a fellow by the name of Dan McAdams, Dr. Dan McAdams, Northwestern University, who I was introduced to by Bruce Feiler in his book. And Dan put together this great protocol that he and his graduate students use to interview people. And in Dan's book, The Stories We Live By, he says, many people, after they go through the interview process at Northwestern, will say to him, "Keep your money. I don't want your money." It was that profound. And he also said there would be tears in the telling. Well, I interviewed 71 people. Of the 71 people, again, mostly strangers, 30 people, Douglas, started to cry during the interview. So yeah, once they got going, they were willing to share. And I think it has something to do with the fact that I was a stranger.
Did people approach you suspiciously at first, thinking you were trying to sell something or like timeshare condominiums or.
Well, I suppose so. When I was traveling from city to city, I had a little tripod and put up a little plaque with and I changed my plaque a couple times, indicating I was going to write a book. And would you like to tell me your story? And people kind of looked at me rather strangely. And some people who talked to me mostly said, "Yeah, okay, that's great," and walked away. Um, so I didn't actually meet anybody through my plaque, but these other people I met, once they looked at my website, saw that there were a few stories up there, and saw what these mini stories were about, I think that helped people open up.
So you would introduce yourself and make an appointment to speak to them, or would you just speak to them right at the meeting?
No, most of the time we made appointment, and which was good because I was able to send them question one. So McAdams has 22 questions in his protocol, and question one was a very high level one, and it was imagine your life and you were about to write a book. What would the chapters in that book be, and how would you get from one chapter to the next? And McAdams says, you can have as many chapters as you want, but preferably have somewhere between 2 and 7. So someone like my daughter, for example, might have 2 chapters. She's 23. I had 6 chapters. I'm in my late 60s now. And so I think that helped people to see that question, to think about it and say, well, what is my life about? And it was cathartic for a lot of people to actually talk about their life.
You had a list of questions that you gave these people, sort of as
Yeah,
a.
absolutely.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was a protocol, as I say, that McAdams wrote at Northwestern University that he and his graduate students use. And I live about 25 miles away from Northwestern, and I met Dan about a year ago. And remarkably, he gave me permission to reproduce his protocol in my book. It's in there as Appendix A. And I tell people, half jokingly, I say, if you're thinking of buying the book, don't buy it for anything I wrote. Buy it for Appendix A. It is the gem in the book because it's something, Douglas, I think we should all do at some point is reflect and write our story, whether we do it by ourselves or have someone interview us.
Well, I have to agree. I think with the advent of social media, a lot of people are sort of doing it whether they know it or not, because presumably once you're gone, your social
Mm-hmm.
media, particularly Facebook and ones that
Yeah.
are sort of chronologically timelined, should be there forever, right? I mean, they
Yeah.
don't come down when people die unless they're deleted intentionally.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So I look at it as people are doing a sort of online diary.
That's a good point. I hadn't thought of that. You wonder sometimes how structured it is. Obviously, McAdams is very structured and gets very, very deep. Um, you wonder sometimes how deep people might go about their lives on Facebook or whatever. But they are chronicling their life. That's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the people. Some people are just posting pictures of their cats and their grandkids or something, and other people are getting into violent, heated conversations
Yeah.
politically or, socially, whatever. Some people are using it for sales, for if they have
Yeah.
their own
Mhm.
business or something like that. I see a lot of different ones on here, and we unfortunately don't have time to go through all of these. But we've got about 6 minutes. Let me just hit a couple of them, and if you can respond to them. I'll do the first one because it's funny. The former model whose husband declined a sheik's generous offer of 2 camels for her.
So that's Joanne, 88, a love story from New York. I met her in Palm Springs through my brother. And unfortunately, her husband died during COVID. So he was a successful sales executive. She was a former model and had a travel business. So they traveled all over the world. And so one year they were in Jordan. And as you said, a sheikh took a shine to Joanne and made an offer of not one, but 2 camels to her husband. And I wrote in my book, tongue in cheek, of course, after serious contemplation, decided to turn down the generous offer because what the heck was he going to do with 2 camels in New York City? But it was a love story, a long, long, long love story.
What do they get for a camel, anyways?
I have no idea. Uh, uh, Apparently that actually happened, and my brother said they've got a lot of other funny stories, but that was the one that made my book.
Well, I tell you, if the camel price was high enough, I might have given my wife, but don't tell her I
Yeah,
said that.
and they made two camels, not one
Two,
but two.
yeah, yeah. Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Let's see. Let's just do a couple more. The gay 15-year-old runaway who became a well-known minister in a major city.
Yeah, so he was actually from my neck of the woods in Nova Scotia. And he was 15, very abusive father. And at 15, he ran away. He was gay and started to realize that. Hopped on the train, had $24, and it cost $24 to go to Toronto and $18 to go to Montreal. So he decided to go to Montreal because he would be left, had a few dollars left over. The police got a wind of him being on that train, and when he got to Quebec City, they boarded it, and the provincial police could not find him. They walked right by him, and so he escaped that, got to Montreal, started living life there, and after a period of time, decided, I need to do something with my life, and went to McGill University and became a minister. And he is a minister in one of the major United Churches of Canada in Montreal, and in a huge church in downtown Montreal. Amazing success story, and I'll be seeing him in June, actually.
The last one, which I probably should have done second since we were on the camel subject, but the non-Muslim man who at significant risk clandestinely snuck into Mecca. Now, I know that there is on the freeway or the highway there is a specific exit that says non-Muslims must take. And it's essentially a ring road that goes around the city of Mecca. And if you're not
Yeah.
Muslim, you have to get off at that exit and circle around the city. So not only did he not take the exit, but he went actually into the city. Wow.
He got right in. Yeah, and so he was very tanned and wore the dressing and so forth. And you probably couldn't tell just by looking at him, but he was from Los Angeles and world traveler. He's been to like 100 countries, and he decided, he's in his 60s now, but as a young man, he decided to go to Mecca, and he got in, got this great picture. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. He said, no, I decided to do that. Interesting fellow, former engineer in Los Angeles.
Was there any particular reason why he wanted to do that?
Well, I think the fact that, as much he traveled to like 100 countries, and I think he just saw it as being a challenge. And why not? It's something not many people have done from the West, I'm sure. And he was an adventurous kind of guy. And so,
Well,
no holding him back.
I can't imagine what the penalty would have been if he had gotten caught. I don't know.
I don't know. I didn't ask, and he probably didn't even think about it is my guess. But no, he actually did that.
So again, the book is called
Ordinary People, Extraordinary Lives. And the subtitle is A Path to Reconciliation in Our Divided Times. And the whole idea is that once you know a person's story, as McAdams says on the back of my book, it's hard to dismiss them, let alone hate them, once you come to know someone's story.
In about 30 seconds, can you tell us what your takeaway was after you did this amazing journey?
Yeah, so I met wonderful people everywhere, Douglas, and everybody has a story. And the one thing when I give a speech and tell people about this, the one thing that comes across in every one of those interviews is regardless of where they were on the totem pole, they wanted me to know that their life mattered, even if it was just because they were the greatest father in the world or greatest mother in the world. Their life mattered, and it counts. The level that they reached in society, that was not the relevant thing. So that was one message I got really clear with everyone that I interviewed. It was kind of neat.
2026, you're going to be doing something in the Ukraine. Are you going to the Ukraine?
I'm going to the Ukraine. So in July of last year, I got an email from someone I interviewed in West Virginia. It says, Greg, I'm going to go to Ukraine and volunteer. You need to go and tell their stories. And I thought, yeah, right. And then about 2 days later, I thought, yeah, right. So I do plan to go to Ukraine in spring, summer of 26. I want to make it a narrative book, but I also want to make it a photo book. And I've already got a photographer from British Columbia actually lined up to go with me. And the third idea about that is to make it a documentary. So my plan is to be in Ukraine for about 3 months in spring, summer of 2026 and tell some of their stories.
Well, I think on that, we're going to have to wind this down. Thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your story. Last question. Do you have a website that you want to give out?
I do. It's GregoryLeesonBooks.com, and Leeson is L2ESON. GregoryLeesonBooks.com.
Okay, super. Well, again, thank you for coming on the show. Nice meeting you. Best of luck, and best of luck in the Ukraine.
Thank you, Douglas. I appreciate that.